The council chamber of the Unity's Promise felt like a cathedral built by conflicting gods. Arched windows framed the curve of Varela Prime below, its oceans catching the light of two suns. Columns rose in alien geometries, spirals, lattices, and crystalline pillars that shimmered with embedded light. Gravity shifted almost imperceptibly every few minutes, a concession to the physiological comfort of the more fragile member species. Commander Elias Rourke sat at the humans' modest delegation table, collar unfastened, hands folded loosely in front of him. His chair seemed slightly too large, but he lounged in it like it was a captain's throne. His mouth curved in a smile, subtle, deliberate, and aimed directly at the Dravic delegation. Across the floor, High Strategos Varkol of the Dravic hegemony sat rigid, his plated crest raised in a display of dominance. Every so often, his eyes flicked to Rourke, then away, as though unsure if engaging with that smirk was worth the energy. The chamber's circular layout placed every delegation in clear view of one another, so the tension wasn't just felt, it was visible, hanging in the still air like a drawn bowstring. Council Speaker Virilath, a tall Varelan with translucent skin and slow, deliberate speech, was droning through the day's agenda. Item 17. Continued negotiations regarding fleet repositioning along the disputed Tethris corridor. Rourke leaned back, tapped a fingertip against the table, and murmured without looking up, "They're stalling." The human beside him, Ambassador Shea, kept her eyes forward. "Don't say it where the recorders can pick it up." "They're always recording," Rourke replied, still smiling. "Sometimes you want them to hear." On the far side, Varkol rose to speak. His voice carried a weight like gravel dragged over metal. "The hegemony reminds the Council that our border fleets are defensive. We reject insinuations otherwise." Rourke tilted his head, studying the alien's posture. Crest high, hands folded behind the back. Confidence, maybe even satisfaction. Too much for a defensive stance. He caught Varkol's gaze for a moment. Didn't blink. Didn't look away. Just let that small, unchanging smile rest there. The Dravic's throat plates shifted, a subtle sign of irritation. The meeting droned on. Rourke let his mind drift, but not away from the game. He watched body language, the flick of eyes between allies, the way certain delegates stiffened when the Dravic spoke. Patterns told stories more clearly than speeches. A vibration buzzed at his wrist. He glanced down discreetly. Personal comms ping. The sender ID was coded Ghost Lantern. He tapped the message open under the table. Possible Dravic fleet massing. Coordinates partial. Transmission compromised. Use caution. He read it twice, parsing what wasn't written. Ghost Lantern wasn't prone to false alarms. If they'd risked sending incomplete intel, it meant urgency. The Dravics were moving pieces already. Ambassador Shea noticed his shift in posture. "Problem," she whispered. "Not yet," he said. "Give me a day and I'll find one." The council adjourned an hour later. Delegates flowed from the chamber into the long, sloping corridors of the Unity's Promise. The air here smelled faintly of metal and the citrus-clean scent of Varelan filtration systems. Rourke hung back, watching Varkol exit. The Strategos walked with slow, purposeful strides, surrounded by two armored aides. Crest still high. Still confident. The kind of posture you wore when you knew you held a hidden blade. Shea stopped beside him. "You're thinking about breaking protocol, aren't you?" "I'm thinking," Rourke said, "that if Ghost Lantern's right, we're already 2 moves behind. And if the Dravics are bluffing, I'd like to know before they call our bluff." "Intelligence reports go through channels," Shea reminded him. "Channels leak. Time bleeds. We've been in enough of these rooms to know how that ends." Shea sighed. "Just don't get caught." Rourke left the diplomatic ring and descended into the human sector. Smaller, more utilitarian, with narrow corridors and bulkheads that hummed faintly from the ship's systems. A few officers nodded as he passed. The human detachment here wasn't large, but they moved like they belonged. He ducked into a quiet alcove by a viewport. Outside, the void stretched in black and silver, Varela's pale crescent on one side, the long hull of the Unity's Promise cutting across the stars. Somewhere out there, cloaked or hidden in slipspace, a Dravic fleet might be preparing to strike. The comm at his wrist buzzed again. This time it was voice only. "You got my message?" a low voice asked. "Got it," Rourke said. "What aren't you telling me?" "Coordinates are incomplete because the Draviks are running split-channel data packets. They're hiding something in the gaps." "Fleet size?" "No read. Big enough that they're burning resources to keep it quiet. And they've shut down diplomatic comm relays on their side of the border." Which meant whatever they were doing, they didn't want anyone, especially the GCU, watching. "You need proof," the voice continued. "Without it, the Council will bury this under procedure until it's too late." "Yeah," Rourke said. "And I think I know where to find it." Later, in his quarters, he reviewed the schematic of the Dravik diplomatic barge docked to the Unity's Promise. Its comm archives would have fleet logs buried deep inside, encrypted, but retrievable with the right tools. The problem wasn't getting in. It was getting out without sparking an interspecies incident. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. The Draviks thought in straight lines. Intimidation, force, inevitability. Humans, well, they zigzagged. Made people guess. He thought of Varkul's posture in the chamber. That was the look of someone sure of victory before the fight even started. Rourke intended to change that. He keyed a secure channel to the alien engineer he'd worked with on a repair project weeks ago. The line chirped, and a rapid, clicking voice answered. "Commander Rourke." Unexpected call. "Need a favor," Rourke said. "One that doesn't get mentioned in any logs." A pause, then a slow click of amusement. "You want to look where you are not allowed to look." "Something like that." "Interested." Another pause. "You humans. Always curious. Meet me in Maintenance Sector 12 at shift's end." Rourke allowed himself the faintest grin. Step 1. Get the right eyes and hands on the job. Step 2. Make the Draviks wonder what else the humans were smiling about. The next morning, the council chamber felt even colder. Light from the double suns filtered through the crystalline panels, painting sharp patterns across the curved floor. Delegates sat in their assigned arcs, eyes forward, expressions locked into the same diplomatic neutrality they'd been perfecting for centuries. Commander Elias Rourke slid into his seat beside Ambassador Shea. His collar was again unfastened, a minor infraction, but one that irritated the protocol officers. He pretended not to notice their glances. Council Speaker Virilath began in their measured tone. "We resume deliberations on the matter of fleet posture along the Tethras corridor. The Dravik hegemony will open." High Strategos Varkul rose. His voice was like steel dragged slow against stone. "The hegemony reminds the Council that stability requires strength. Our border patrols remain defensive. Any suggestion otherwise is a fabrication." Rourke leaned forward, elbows on the table. "That's interesting," he said, just loud enough to carry. "Last time someone told me their fleet was purely defensive, they were parking it on my doorstep." The ripple in the chamber was almost visible. A trillion delegate blinked rapidly, uncertain if the human had just insulted a major military power. Varkul's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. Ambassador Shea's whisper was ice. "Elias, not the time." "Sometimes," Rourke murmured back, "the time makes itself." Virilath gave a perfunctory cough, the Varellan equivalent of clearing one's throat, and the session stumbled onward. As discussions wound through procedural tangles, Rourke leaned sideways and, with deliberate timing, winked at a Varellan junior delegate across the circle. The alien froze, crest frill flattening, then looked down at their datapad as if studying it could shield them from whatever human trick they'd just witnessed. Later, away from the chamber's formal glare, a different set of eyes was watching him. In a side hall lined with transparent panels showing the endless dark of space, Recorder Talith of the Varellan delegation made a quiet voice note. "Humans do not follow expected rhythms of interaction. Their expressions are often non-linear in meaning." Today, Commander Rourke engaged in prolonged eye contact with the Dravik Strategos, a behavior considered a direct challenge by most predatory species. He then compressed one eye in a gesture without formal record in our diplomatic lexicon. Reaction among observers ranged from confusion to unease. This unpredictability may constitute a strategic asset. By the time Rourke reached the human sector, the corridors were quieter, humming with the deep background pulse of the Unity's promise. He keyed in the override for a maintenance hatch and ducked inside. The space smelled faintly of coolant and warm alloy. A figure emerged from behind a panel, multiple jointed limbs folding tools away. The alien engineer's chitinous faceplate clicked in greeting. "Commander," they said, voice translated through a small device on their harness. "You seek my assistance." "I need to see what the Draviks don't want anyone to see," Rourke replied. "They've got a comms archive on their diplomatic barge, deep storage. Fleet movement logs." "That is dangerous," the engineer said, and their forelimbs twitched in what Rourke had learned was amusement. "You expect me to bypass their encryption?" "I expect you to give me a way in without their sensors catching it. Once I'm in, I can copy what I need." The engineer tilted their head. "Why?" "The Council will not act on your word alone. Because once I have something real, it's not just my word." After a moment, the engineer plucked a small, hexagonal device from a pouch. "This will mimic environmental sensor output for 60 seconds. No more. After that, Dravik systems will notice." 60 seconds is enough," Rourke said, taking the device. Before making his move, he arranged to meet with the human intelligence officer who'd sent the warning, codename Ghost Lantern. They met in a dark observation lounge, one wall entirely viewport, the stars spinning slowly as the ship rotated. Ghost Lantern kept their hood low, voice quiet. "The Draviks are using cloaked slipspace corridors. They're threading their fleet through gaps in GCU monitoring." "How many ships?" Rourke asked. "No confirmed count. At least a strike group, maybe more. And they're cutting their own comm relays, which means they're preparing for action outside Council oversight." Rourke drummed his fingers on the armrest. "So the proof is sitting on their own ship?" "Yes," Ghost Lantern said, "and if you trip their alarms, they'll spin it as espionage and use it to justify an offensive. Which might be their plan anyway. That's why I'll make sure they never see me coming." That evening, Rourke walked the docking concourse where the Dravik barge was berthed. Its hull was a jagged geometry of black armor plates, lightless except for faint, blood-red glows at its airlock seals. Dravik guards stood motionless at either side, armored from crest to tail. He didn't approach, yet. Instead, he studied the maintenance crawlways running parallel to the concourse, noting the junctions, the blind angles, the vents large enough for a human frame. Ambassador Shea's voice came through his earpiece, tight with frustration. "Elias, whatever you're planning isn't on the record," he finished for her. "And the less you know, the cleaner your hands. You step out of line and the Draviks will use it to crush our credibility here. Which is why I'll make it look like I never left the line." He cut the channel before she could argue. That night, in his quarters, he laid the hexagonal device on the desk and turned it over in his hands. 60 seconds of invisibility to their sensors. That was all he'd get. Enough time to slip inside a security ring, copy the right files, and slip out before the system knew he'd been there. He set the device down, eyes narrowing. The Draviks thought in certainties, in straight lines and predictable counters. Humans weren't built that way. They were the unexpected knife in the dark, or the smile across the table that meant the knife was already at your throat. Varkul had looked too comfortable today. That would have to change. The station's artificial night cycle had begun, but the Unity's promise never truly slept. Soft ambient light traced along the corridors, security drones floated in slow patrol arcs, and the distant hum of life support systems filled every silence. Commander Elias Rourke moved like a shadow along a seldom-used maintenance ring, head bent as though inspecting the walls, but every step was calculated. The Dravik diplomatic barge loomed through a segmented viewport, a predatory silhouette against the scatter of distant stars. Its hull looked inert, but Rourke knew that behind those black plates, a dozen sensor arrays were watching for the smallest irregularity. He tapped his wrist console. Timer ready. Sensor loop device armed. 1 minute. That was all the gift he had. The crawlway's hatch opened with a hiss. Rourke slid inside, feeling the temperature drop. This section was unheated, a dead zone between pressurized areas. His breath fogged faintly as he moved, the metal beneath his boots ringing dull in the confined space. He clipped the hexagonal device into a panel junction and thumbed the activation switch. The edges lit in a low amber glow, then dimmed. 60 seconds. He didn't waste them. Rourke dropped into a vertical shaft and climbed down 2 levels, every movement fast but deliberate. The Dravik hull was accessible through a thin service umbilical, meant for automated drones, not humans, but he wedged himself through. His boots hit the Dravik barge's maintenance deck. Black alloy walls absorbed light, and the air smelled faintly of oil and some sharp, chemical tang. His wrist console pinged quietly. 45 seconds. The archive node was where the schematic said it would be, a recessed alcove behind a sealed panel. Dravik locks were mechanical digital hybrids, designed to resist both hacking and brute force. Rourke didn't bother with finesse. He had the bypass code from the Varellan engineer. The panel clicked open, revealing a crystalline data core, its surface glowing faint blue. His portable drive latched onto the core's interface. The transfer began immediately, a silent rush of raw fleet telemetry. 30 seconds. A faint vibration passed through the floor, a power fluctuation, or maybe a security sweep. Rourke's jaw tightened. The barge's AI might already be sniffing for inconsistencies. The drive's display ticked upward, 63%, 74%, 88%. 15 seconds. Then he heard it, a scraping sound, metallic, deliberate. Rourke froze, eyes tracking to the end of the corridor. A Dravik guard stepped into view, crest armor casting jagged shadows. Its 4 eyes swept the deck. The guard's posture was uncertain. Its sensors weren't screaming intruder, but something was off. The drive pinged. Complete. Rourke yanked it free, sealed the panel, and turned toward the umbilical without a word. 7 seconds. The guard took 2 steps forward, head tilting. 4 seconds. Rourke slipped into the umbilical and began climbing, muscles burning with urgency. The device's amber glow winked out. The station's sensors came back online. He didn't stop until he was 3 decks up and clear of the Dravik sector. A slow breath escaped him, half relief, half adrenaline burn. The drive in his pocket felt heavier than it should, loaded not with metal but consequence. 2 hours later, in the human sector's private briefing room, Ambassador Shea stood over the table, scanning the decrypted data projected above it. Lines of coordinates, timestamps, and slipspace corridor vectors spun slowly in the air. "This," she began, then stopped. "This is proof." Rourke leaned back in his chair. They're moving an entire battle group through unregistered corridors. No patrol beacons, no council clearance. Do you have any idea what this will do to the chamber? Yeah, he said. It'll wake them up. But Shea didn't look convinced. She folded her arms. If we present this, the Draviks will deny it, call it fabricated. They'll demand to know how we got it. Then we don't give them the trail, Rourke replied. We leak it to someone else. Let the Varellans or the Trillions discover it on their own. Her gaze sharpened. And if they trace it back to you? He smiled thinly. They won't. I'm a ghost, remember. Elsewhere, in a dim archive room deep in the Varellan sector, Recorder Talith reviewed a secure packet delivered anonymously. Fleet vectors, cloaked transit points, each detail lined perfectly with rumors they'd been chasing for cycles. Humans, Talith thought, crest frill lifting in cautious respect. They gamble with impossible odds, and somehow they keep winning. That same night, aboard the Dravik barge, High Strategos Varkul stood before the archive node Rourke had touched. His security chief spoke in clipped tones. Minor sensor anomaly detected during cycle 438. No intruder confirmed. No breach recorded. Varkul stared at the unmarked floor. Something in his instincts said otherwise. Increase security sweeps. And triple-check the archive integrity. I do not like ghosts. Back in his quarters, Rourke set the portable drive on his desk. The mission was complete, but the unease in his gut hadn't lifted. 60 seconds had been enough, this time. But the Draviks would adjust. The council chamber was never quiet. Not truly. Even before the day's first session, the air was alive with layered conversations, voices from a dozen worlds mixing into an almost physical pressure. Translator drones flitted overhead, carrying tones across languages in polished neutrality. Ambassador Shea stepped into the circular hall with Rourke shadowing her, his uniform sharp, expression unreadable. The central dais glowed faintly, waiting for the official proceedings, while the tiered seating above filled with delegates in shifting patterns of color and posture. Shea kept her pace steady, eyes forward. "The leak worked," she murmured. "Virellans filed a security motion. They're calling it a matter of interstellar stability." Rourke's mouth curved in a humorless half-smile. "And the Draviks?" She didn't look at him. "Silent. Which means they're planning their defense." By the time the chamber seal closed, the hum of conversation had sharpened into tension. Virellan recorder Talith stood on the speaking platform, crest arched in calculated calm. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," the translator drones echoed, "our intelligence confirms unauthorized movement of Dravik military assets through unsanctioned slipspace corridors. The scope and precision of these maneuvers suggest premeditated escalation." The chamber reacted instantly, ripples of sound, flares of bioluminescence from aquatic envoys, metallic clicks from insectoid delegations. On the Dravik side, High Strategos Varkul remained motionless, his gaze locked on Talith with predator stillness. "This evidence," Talith continued, "was obtained from multiple corroborating sources, not least from sensor echoes within the Virellan border region. We submit it for immediate review and demand clarification from the Dravik representative." Varkul rose with deliberate weight, the layered plates of his armor whispering against each other. His voice, deep, resonant, rolled through the chamber. "These accusations are fabrications, built upon doctored data. We will not dignify them with recognition." His eyes swept the tiers, pausing a fraction too long on the human delegation. Shea felt the weight of that pause. Rourke caught it, too, leaning slightly toward her. "He suspects," he said under his breath. "Suspects isn't proof," she replied, though her jaw tightened. The Trillion envoy, a sleek figure of silvery scales, spoke next. "Regardless of fabrication claims, the coordinates align with multiple unregistered spatial anomalies. We must investigate, privately, if need be." That broke the rhythm. The council president called for order, but the chamber fractured into side debates, accusations traded in controlled tones. The word war wasn't spoken, but it sat heavy in the air. Rourke studied faces rather than speeches. Some delegations leaned forward with predatory interest, others avoided eye contact entirely. Patterns emerged, alliances shifting in real time. An adjournment was called to allow private negotiations. Shea and Rourke withdrew to a side corridor, the noise of the chamber muffled behind layered doors. Shea exhaled slowly. "They're circling it. If the council authorizes an investigation, the Dravik secrecy collapses." Rourke shook his head. "It won't be that clean. They'll stall, bury it in procedural knots. We need them off balance before the vote." She eyed him. "And how do you propose we do that? We can't push harder without exposing how we got the data." He glanced down the corridor, voice low. "What if someone else exposes it for us, someone the Draviks can't openly challenge?" Her brow furrowed. "You mean the Caridian observers? They've been looking for an excuse to cut Dravik supply lines. Give them this, let them think they're first to uncover it." Before she could answer, a soft chime sounded from Rourke's wrist console. A secure, untraceable signal. 3 short pulses, then silence. His expression darkened. Shea caught it. "What is it?" "Message from my source," he said. "We're not the only ones who went digging. And whoever else did, they left fingerprints." They moved to a secure conference alcove. Rourke brought up the feed, grainy security stills from the Dravik barge's interior. A figure in a hooded environmental suit, face obscured, moving toward the same archive node he'd accessed. Timestamp: less than 4 hours after his own incursion. Shea's eyes narrowed. "Someone followed you." "No," Rourke said. "They didn't know I'd been there. They were after the same target for their own reasons. Friend or enemy? He closed the display. Right now, that's the wrong question. The right one is, did they take something that changes the game? Back in the Dravik sector of the station, Varkol examined the same still images, though his version lacked the human's prior visit. His security chief's tone was clipped. We've matched the intruder's gait pattern to 3 potential species. None are human. Varkol's frill lowered in thought. 2 violations of our sanctum in the same cycle. Either coincidence has grown teeth, or someone plays a deeper game. Hours later, in a dimly lit diplomatic lounge, Rourke found Talith sitting alone, a steaming cup in hand. The Varellan's crest dipped in acknowledgement as he approached. You leaked the coordinates, Rourke said, no preamble. Talitha's crest arched faintly. And you obtained them in the first place. Careful, Rourke warned. Talitha's eyes glinted. I am careful. The Draviks are not. But if there's another player, perhaps we should both be concerned. Shay arrived minutes later, sliding into the seat opposite them. We don't have time for delicate games. The chamber reconvenes tomorrow. If the vote swings against investigation, the Draviks win months of breathing room. Then we shorten their breath, Talith said simply. Rourke studied the Varellan's tone. You've got something else, don't you? Talith didn't answer directly. Instead, he tapped a claw lightly against his cup. Perhaps tomorrow's discussion will benefit from a demonstration. That night, Rourke walked the empty observation ring alone. Beyond the glass, the station's perimeter lights traced pale arcs against the void. The Dravik barge sat in its berth, dark and still. He knew Talitha's demonstration could mean a dozen things, none of them predictable. But unpredictability had a certain usefulness. The council chamber was packed to capacity, every seat occupied, every delegate present. The air carried a taut, metallic taste, anticipation laced with suspicion. The vote on the Dravik investigation would be decided today, but everyone knew the speeches beforehand could tilt the outcome. Shay stood at her delegation's desk, hands resting lightly on the surface, watching the movement across the tiers. Rourke leaned close enough for only her to hear. Talitha's demonstration is coming, he murmured. No idea what it is, but it'll be aimed right between Varkol's eyes. Shay didn't answer. She was studying the Dravik strategist himself, calm, motionless, but with that predatory stillness that suggested calculation beneath. The chamber seal chimed, silencing the low hum of side conversations. The council president, tall and severe, addressed the assembly. We convene to deliberate the Varellan motion for a formal investigation into alleged Dravik military incursions. The floor recognizes Recorder Talith. Talith rose with deliberate poise, carrying a slim data rod in one claw. Esteemed delegates, he began, yesterday I spoke of coordinates, unregistered corridors and anomalous movements. Today, I bring more than numbers. He stepped to the central dais, slotting the rod into the chamber's projection core. The lights dimmed. A three-dimensional display bloomed into being, rotating slowly, a recording from deep space surveillance. The feed showed a massive Dravik vessel slipping through a narrow distortion in space, emerging on the other side near a Varellan border outpost. Time stamps rolled along the corner. The resolution sharpened, revealing cargo holds opening to release unmanned probes, each probe marked with the Dravik military crest. Gasps and murmurs swept the chamber. The recording didn't stop there. It cut to internal sensor readings, Dravik energy signatures mapped against a known weapons test pattern. Varkol was on his feet before the sequence ended. Fabrication, he thundered, voice echoing against the chamber walls. This is spliced from stolen data. Talitha's crest dipped in calculated calm. If it were stolen, strategos, then it must have been yours to begin with. The president rapped a hand against the console. Order. But the damage was done. The visual evidence had set the delegates whispering in new tones. Rourke leaned toward Shay. That's not from us. His angles, his sources, they're cleaner. Someone handed Talith that footage. Shay's mind flicked back to the hooded intruder in the Dravik archive. Maybe our ghost just showed their hand. The Trillion Envoy requested the floor. Whether fabricated or not, the footage shows patterns consistent with multiple border violations in recent cycles. We cannot dismiss the risk. Several delegations nodded openly now, breaking the earlier caution. Even some who had leaned Dravik's way sat rigid, avoiding the Strategos' gaze. Varkal attempted to recover, his voice low but edged. The Council should recall that the Varellans have long sought to undermine Dravik's stability. This display is merely another blade in that campaign. Shay caught the subtle shift in the room, not toward the Draviks, but away from them. Varkal's defense sounded less like denial and more like damage control. When the President called for final remarks before the vote, Shay requested recognition. She kept her tone measured, her words deliberate. Members of this Council, she began, the question before us is not whether we favor one power over another, but whether we uphold the principle that no world, no fleet, is above accountability. If the Draviks are innocent, an investigation will clear them. If they are not, the truth will keep the peace from breaking. She let her gaze sweep the tiers, pausing only a heartbeat on each undecided delegation. If we choose silence today, we set precedent, not for peace, but for impunity. The chamber shifted subtly, bodies leaning forward, murmurs stilled. Even Talith watched her with a slight incline of his head. The President called the vote. One by one, delegates cast their decisions, the results tallying on the display ring encircling the chamber. The Draviks voted against, the Varellans for. The Trillions, after a long pause, voted in favor. Smaller delegations followed suit, the pattern emerging before the final votes were even tallied. Rourke's eyes stayed fixed on the numbers as they climbed past the threshold. The motion passed. Investigation authorized. The chamber erupted in overlapping reactions, some celebratory, others sharp with outrage. Varkal remained standing, his gaze locked on Shay's across the room. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a slow, deliberate promise. Talith stepped close to her as the delegates began to disperse. You have your investigation. Use it quickly, before the Draviks decide evidence can be erased. Shay gave a short nod. And your footage? He let his crest lower slightly, a private acknowledgement. Let's just say it came from someone who prefers not to be named. But they'll be watching. Outside the chamber, in the quieter corridors, Rourke fell into step beside her. You realize this means we're going to have to get into Dravik territory officially now. No shadows this time. Official doesn't mean visible, she replied. He smirked faintly. That's what I like about you. Across the station, in the Dravik sector, Varkal stood before a hollow map of the contested corridors, the chamber vote still fresh in his mind. His security chief approached. We've confirmed the leak source is not Varellan intelligence, the chief reported. It came through an unregistered relay. Trace leads nowhere. Varkal's frill lifted, just slightly. Then there is a third hand in this game. His voice dropped, almost a growl. Find it. Before they make their next move. The human delegation's transport departed the station that night, bound for the contested border. Shay sat in the dim cabin, the hum of the engines steady beneath her feet. Rourke was across from her, reviewing mission parameters, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on the hooded figure, on Talitha's clean evidence, on the way Varkal had looked at her in the chamber. This wasn't over. The vote had only shifted the battlefield. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the unseen player who had touched both sides was still moving their pieces.